just me. Welcome back, Chappelle.
Okay.
Welcome back to your flip classroom.
Okay.
Okay?
Now?
You ready? All right, on three. 1, 2, 3.
Good morning. Welcome back, Chappelle. Welcome back to your flip classroom.
Yeah, good job.
From North Carolina.
Perfect.
North Carolina is the spot.
Welcome back, Chappelle. Welcome back to it. Welcome back to your flip classroom and that darling introduction by my mom, right? That was my mom in North Carolina saying hello to y'all and stuff like that. But the big thing about it, though, is we're about to pick up right where we left off in class, talking about the chaos that's kind of going on in Europe right now, all right? Where we took a little bit of time right before break, definitely jump back, study that stuff a little bit. I'm going to also make sure that we get that study guide posted here in about 2 seconds, right? I'm going to make sure it's posted before Sunday. Very, very positive about that. So y'all can actually get to work on actually understanding this really, really in-depth stuff, right? Now, going into it, what I'm getting at, though, is we left off talking about how, yes, from 1815 to 1848, is that era of time going to be known as the Age of Metternich? Yes, it is going to be known as the Age of Metternich, right? And the Age of Metternich was really, really light on international war, right? You didn't see European powers really going to war with each other from 1858 to 1815 to 1848, right? Nobody was fighting each other because the conservatives were back in power again, following exile of Napoleon, the chopping up of all that land at the Congress of Vienna, right? And the thing about it that we need to understand is that they believed that the balance of power had been reoriented, right? But they were also within their own countries suppressing violent revolts, right? Like people inside of Great Britain were revolting and freaking out about these things like the Corn Laws and like civil liberties being dismissed and like all this other crazy stuff. But every time that they would rise up and try to protest, these conservative leaders would come in and crush those protests, right? And we'll talk about a couple of those in this flip. And then we're also going to talk about how there's a lot of other chaos going on, right? The Hungry 40s, the Irish potato famine, and how all these people in Europe are just going to get so fed up with this that they all decide to have 17 revolutions in 1 year, right? Which is absolutely bananas. Now, a lot of these people say that these revolutions were failed ultimately because they didn't directly accomplish the long-standing goals that they wanted. But if you ask me personally, I think they were pretty successful because feudalism was pretty much dead after 1848, right? But the thing about it, though, is we're going to go ahead and watch a little clip of that real quick, and then I'll be right back, okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about some of these things, like, for example, how those things are going to lead to nationalism going forward, okay? But I'll see you on a sec. That, oh, we're not going to war with each other. It's fine. But it was so chaotic in some countries. Like, literally, France went through 3 kings in 30 years. 4, if you actually really, really look into it, okay? Because, like, this guy right here is the brother of Louis XVIII that was brought back following, like, the Congress of Vienna, right? Louis XVI's brother was Louis XVIII. Louis XVIII would come to power, but he would eventually die. This guy, Charles X, came to power and made everyone so mad that they had another revolution that actually went down in 3 days, right? So, like, now, and then also, of course, at one point or another, there was a guy named Louis XIX who was king for 20 minutes in France, and then you got this dude who ends up coming to power named Louis Philippe, right? But what is it that I'm trying to get at when I'm telling you this? Is that's how actually chaotic it was, y'all. They went through that many kings in 30 years because they kept having little baby revolutions that would run people out of town, right? So the thing going into it is the liberal ideas of constitutional government is that they're spreading, right? They're spreading secretly. Organizations are getting together. They're fighting small little revolutions. They're trying to exert power over the conservatives. Things are really unstable, right? And another big thing about it as well is that revolts are going on all over the place. Right now, this you need right here, okay? This you need. So the thing about it is, take the ideas of a liberal constitutional government, not an absolutist one, getting rid of absolute governments, right? Take that idea of a liberal constitutional government, the ideas of John Locke, Baron de Montesquieu, and all these other Enlightenment thinkers that the French Revolution espoused and demonstrated. Take that and start spreading it secretly throughout the continent, right? And then have your absolutists who are still trying to control these people who want parliaments and voting and rights and things like that. Of course, revolts are going to break out, right? Some of the big ones included one known as Peterloo. There was a Decemberist revolt that broke out in Russia, and another big one called the Three Glorious Days. The Peterloo one literally was held in England, and it was protesting failing laws that were giving rich people more money and starving poor people of money to buy food with. And so literally a cavalry came in and killed a woman and her child and 15 other people. The Decemberist one happened in Russia when literally the military was like, I don't want to fight for this new king. And the other group of the military shot not all of them, right? And then also the Three Glorious Days was when literally the government of, like, the people of France ran this guy out and this guy came to power, right? In 3 days. They had a revolution in 3 days. How wild is that, right? But also, take that and couple it with the fact that by the time the 1840s roll around, there's famines that are sweeping the entire continent, right? That's why they referred to it as the Hungry 40s, right? Food prices are beginning to skyrocket all over the continent due to bad harvests, right? So harvests were going down terribly, mainly due to a disease that was sweeping crops, not people, during the 40s, right? But food prices are really, really high, and what do socialists feel about fluctuating food prices? They hate it, right? This is why a socialist believes in planned economies, right? They're like, bread should never cost more than X because it's what poor people can afford, right? Well, the thing about it is, this is a very, very bad moment going on in European history. One of the biggest ones, the thing that ends up happening is this moment known as the Irish Potato Blight, the Irish Potato Famine, aka known as the Great Famine, right? The thing about it is that you need to understand is that this key event kind of led to the creation of the Hungry 40s. Well, what it was farmers in Ireland start harvesting their potatoes for the year. Now, potatoes were meant to feed the Irish while the Irish farmed wheat and barley that were supposed to go off and make bread, right? Well, they start digging up their potatoes and they start realizing that they have a disease, right? It's a disease called potato blight, right? And it affected the type of potato that they grew known as the common brown potato, right? Why did this happen? A lot of it had to do with that mass production farming. Irish farmers were being used to grow grain and then fed potatoes. Well, why the potato though? Because populations were growing heavily in Ireland and potatoes were really easy to grow. But the third reason why the Great Famine happened is because of monoculture issues, right? They weren't growing a variety of potatoes. They were growing one type of potato, the common brown one. So if a disease comes through that affects that one brown one, what happens to all the food the Irish people are supposed to eat? It's all dead. Literally, the Incans farmed thousands of types of potatoes. So if a disease came through and affected one, they still had several hundred other potatoes they could eat. It's not a big deal, right? But they had given one type of potato to the Irish to actually use. This right here is a monoculture when we farm one type of a thing, whereas biodiversity will save lives. But you have to understand, monocultures made more money, right? So it made more money for the British people growing all these grains. The results of the Great Famine and the Irish Potato Blight included mass immigration. Heavy numbers of Irish people are actually going to move to places like the United States, going in through the port of New Orleans and into New York. And still to this day, y'all, listen to me very carefully, still to this day, the Irish population has not recovered from the potato famine, right? There are still less people living in Ireland right now than there were living in 1830s Ireland, right? So results are going to be mass immigration, death from starvation and stillbirthing, because women who weren't eating enough during the potato famine and stuff like that, if they were pregnant, the child would oftentimes die because they weren't giving the child enough calories, right? And also, it led to a rise in food prices, because if the farmers are dying and our supply of grain is going down, the price of the bread is going up, right? So you're seeing bread riots and things like that break out all over the continent. What this is going to lead to, this terrible situations, including the Hungry 40s, is going to lead to these things known as the revolutions of 1848, right? The revolutions of 1848 was a series of dramatic and violent revolutions that broke out all over Europe demanding reform because people are sick and tired of this garbage. While the conservatives sit around like Clemens von Metternich and like, oh, we haven't gone to war with each other in a little while. Shut up, poor person. And literally are suppressing all these violent revolts and stuff like that. What finally happens is that the citizens of cities get together and they're like, we're going to hold revolutions that they can't stop, right? And it was known as the springtime of the peoples, right? Because the classical liberals and the socialists are going to get together and hold a revolution against the conservatives, and it will sweep the entire continent. Y'all, 17 revolutions broke out all over Europe all at once in 1 year in 1848 in the same handful of months in March, right? One happened here, 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 here. All those little red dots are revolutions that broke out all over Europe, right? So getting into it, what were their demands? What did these people want? They wanted more government participation, as in they wanted legislative bodies, like the British had the parliament the entire time. Notice really quickly, Britain doesn't have one of those little red dots. They didn't have a revolution of 1848 because they had a parliament the whole time. They want more government participation. They want a decrease in monarchical power. They want guaranteed rights that are outlined in a constitution. And they want protection under the law. They want normal things that we as Americans today enjoy with our Bill of Rights and our Constitution and things like that. They want these same demands because they were living in countries that are still absolutist. And how are they going to accomplish this? Some of you are like, well, I don't understand, Mr. Terry. Isn't the conservative army just going to come in and crush these things under people like Clemens von Metternich? I like where your head's at, and you would be right. But their genius in their effectiveness came to the fact of what they built. The people of Europe during these little revolutions actually used the cities to their advantages, and they built these things called barricades, right? They would use scraps, trash, cobblestones, bricks, anything that they could find, and they would build a wall across a street, preventing the military from moving down it and giving them a thing to hide behind so they could pop up over the top and shoot at the military coming down the road, right? So literally such a genius thing. This right here is a barricade that was actually established in France. Something to give you a heads up, by the way, if there was an Olympic sport that came to building barricades, the French would win it every single time, right? So going into it, what ends up happening is they actually get a lot of their demands. The conservatives give in. There's huge early success, right? Because literally Francis King, that last, the third one, is going to abdicate the throne. And then they decide to get rid of a monarchy altogether, and they elect a president, and the guy's name is Napoleon III, who's actually, ironically enough, Napoleon's nephew. Fun fact, right? Now, some of you are like, well, what about Napoleon II? He's dead already. He died from tuberculosis in Austria, right? Now, new constitutions are going to be granted. Nation states are going to be formed instead of kingdoms, right? And people are going to identify with their countrymen rather than with their king, right? So as you're seeing, these revolutions were huge. Yo, they're writing constitutions because the people of Europe went into the streets and built walls to prevent the military from moving down the road. And as you can tell, who did this together? The classical liberals and the socialists joined forces together to get these revolutions accomplished. And things were moving in a great direction. The people are getting their demands. They're getting the things that they want. Yes! But then they started fighting with each other. So, the biggest thing about it is they start arguing with one another as the revolutions progressed forward, right? When the conservatives gave in, when monarchs are abdicating, when we're getting presidents now in France and stuff like that, revolutionaries began to fight each other over different ideas. Now, suffrage is the best example because remember, liberals only want some people to vote. Socialists want everyone to vote. So in these early legislative meetings, in these new things like the Chamber of Deputies in France, or the the Frankfurt Parliament in Prussia, right? And all these new little organizations, they start arguing over how many rights everyone gets, right? Because they disagreed on stuff. So what the conservatives are going to do is they're going to seize on this opportunity to overthrow those new constitutions and roll the reforms back a little bit. The only thing that really truly died because of these revolutions was the ideas of serfdom, right? Serfdom would be outlawed in many different countries, including Prussia and Austria, right? Different areas of Europe would actually outlaw serfdom and feudalism finally and completely because of the revolutions of 1848. But a lot of the demands that the socialists wanted actually got rolled back. The only things that were really left around was some countries kept those legislative bodies and allowed people to continue. Exactly, right? There you go, right? We were talking all about those crazy revolutions of 1848, right? 17 revolutions in 1 year. That's wild, right? However, though, okay, when you're looking at these revolutions, all that they may or may not have been failed, right? There's still a very massive turning point in Western civilization's history. Because in the 1800s, what they're going to cause, though, is the rise of a very new ism, right? The only true ism that's now spreading and staying true is the idea of nationalism, right? Now, in 1848, you're going to see the rise of a huge concept pop up, right? A flower comes out of the rubble that is the revolutions of 1848. The barricades may be gone, but literally the cracks in the cobblestone leads to this little flower, this idea coming out of there. And it's the idea of nationalism, self-determination, and unification, right? What you're going to see is a lot of groups in Europe, just like when we talked about in Haiti under Toussaint Louverture, and then also Jean-Jacques Dessalines, them leading this massive slave revolt for a national identity that they believed in, because they were like, we are not French, we are not this, we are not that, we are former slaves, and we are Haitian, right? That is going to lead to them actually having their own new country, right? Well, this is going to also spread over into Europe as well. And after the revolutions of 1848, particularly in areas like Italy and Prussia, people are going to begin to look around and be like, wait a minute, we all speak German. Those guys over there speak German. We all eat the same stuff. We sing the same songs. We've got different stories that we've been telling since we were kids and stuff like that. Why aren't we a country? Why aren't we together, right? So they decide to do that and effectively come together. And you're going to see the massive leading of unification movements throughout this entire area. Now, you have to understand, though, why would the conservatives of Europe, why would Austria hate nationalism? Well, because nationalism is a virus for an empire, right? You have to understand the Austrians for a long time controlled a huge empiric territory, right? Look at all that land in orange right there. That's all the stuff that is owned by the Austrians, right? Now look, they owned an area called Hungary, and Hungarians speak Hungarian, and they have their own Hungarian traditions. Like, for example, I have a sister-in-law who is Hungarian, and she is awesome, and we went to visit her in Budapest and stuff like that, and they have all these different things like chicken paprikash, and it's so freaking good. By the way, if y'all want to watch any of those travel vlogs where I actually went to Budapest with my wife and my brother-in-law and stuff like that, it was an absolute blast. They're way back in the depths, though, of what you call it. Down deep in the YouTube channel somewhere. But the thing about it is Austrians controlled Hungarians, and Hungarians are like, we're not Austrian. We want to be our own thing. So in 1848, their revolution was directly related to them being their own country, right? Empires will fall if nationalism carries forward. New countries will be created. Cultures will unite. And Italy is a great example of this, right? Because a lot of area in northern Italy was controlled by Austria, right? So for example, what ended up happening in Italy, to give you a crash course on it, this guy right here named Victor Emmanuel II got together with this guy right there, Count Cavour, and they unified the northern territory away from the actual Austrians, and that guy in the south named Giuseppe Garibaldi is going to move up through the bottom, and what's going to happen is those two got together, and that dude in the south, they met in the middle, and they took Italy from looking like this, which is a patchwork of different states, to looking like that by the year of 1877, right? Now, 1861 is the very first year that Italy became a country. 1861, I want you to keep that in the back of your mind real quick. When our Civil War began, Italy was just made into a country, right? So Italy, the concept of Italy being a country is very young, right? Like Italy has been a country for almost 100 years less time than America has been a country. But ironically enough, Italians, okay, have been around for thousands of more years than Americans have. And people have been speaking Italian for hundreds and hundreds more years than America has ever been a country. But these people were never unified into their own area because people like Austria and France and Spain and the other powerful conservatives owned land in their areas, right? So what's going to happen, though, is after the revolutions of 1848, they're going to decide that they want to unify together, right? And so you're going to see people like those two guys in the north and Giuseppe Garibaldi in the south meet in the middle and create a new country. But the best example of like talking about the unification of people is the unification of Germany, right? Because we're going to talk about in class how Germany is going to get a wild hair and decide that they're going to get together and form their own brand new country. And it's going to be called Deutschland. And where it's going to come from is the remains of the Holy Roman Empire will be formed together and create themselves into a new country known as Germany, right? But I'll see y'all soon. We're going to talk about that in class because I don't want to overwhelm y'all too much information coming off of Easter break. And then also because we do have some extra little bit of time, we're going to talk about the unification of Germany. Then we're going to finish that up in a flip. Then we're going to talk about imperialism. We're going to finish that up in a flip. And then we're going to take a test, all right? But I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one.